Hey guys, so based off of the results from yesterday's survey, it seemed that one of the biggest areas that was a concern that you guys were asking a lot of questions about or wanted more feedback on was the cross sections. Now, normally when I do cross sections, I'm able to do Play-Doh with you guys, have you a lot more hands-on, and it's just kind of difficult to do this digitally. But I am going to try. I went ahead and got some Play-Doh, and I usually have fishing wire to be able to do this with because it's easier to cut it like a plane would need to be, but I don't have fishing wire. So I'm going to be using a knife, a little plastic flimsy knife, and trying to give you the idea of what a cross section is. So a cross section is just a two-dimensional figure. It's a shape, like a triangle or a square, a trapezoid, a rectangle, a circle. It's just a two-dimensional shape that is the result from cutting into a three-dimensional figure. So here, I went ahead and got some Play-Doh and formed a cone. So I don't know if you can see this very easily, but this is a cone, a plastic clear cone that I was able to go ahead and smush the Play-Doh into and form it a little bit so that you guys could have kind of a visual aid. So if you're looking at it, just looking at it straight on, the shape that you should be able to see right here is that a cone has a triangular shape to it, but because it's that three-dimensional, it also has a circular base. So because that circle base, it's almost like you have an infinite amount of circles that are proportional to each other, just being stacked on top of each other until you come up to a vertex or a top point. So when you cut into a cone, so if I wanted to take a slice out of this, depending on how you slice it will determine the kind of shape that you're going to get. So there's two ways that you can slice it. Parallel, which it depends on how you're holding your shape. If I'm holding my shape upright, parallel is going to be going left and right. If I've turned my shape and it's now on its side, then parallel is now going to go up and down. What parallel means, if you think about it, parallel lines never touch each other. So when we say that something is parallel to the base, it means it's never going to touch your base. It's never going to change what your base shape would look like. So to be parallel to the base means that I'm not going to touch that bottom part at all. So I'm going to slice it this way or this way. So let me go ahead and I'm going to bring this down and slice parallel to my base. It's probably going to smush this up a little bit, but it's the best that I can do without having fishing wire. All right, so once I've sliced it parallel to the base, so I've now taken a chunk of my base shape off. And when I turn it, I've still got what the base shape was. It's a circle. So in this case, cutting it parallel to the base, cutting the cone parallel to the base, I'm slicing straight through it. So a lot of you thought, oh, it's rectangles, because the plane that they're showing you kind of looks like a rectangle, but it's not. It's just an idea that there's something that's slicing it in all directions that it can expand through. So it looks like it's a rectangle that's slicing it, but that's not the cross section. The cross section is when you pull the piece apart, what shape are you going to get? So if I take a cross section of the cone and I slice it parallel to that base, that basically means I'm taking the bottom off of that base and I'm just going to get a circle again. Okay, so remember, cross sections are two-dimensional shapes that you're taking off of a three-dimensional figure. So that's parallel to the base, right? Doesn't touch the base, doesn't affect the base. Perpendicular to the base means that it is going to slice right through the base shape. So that means I'm going to slice right down through the top. So if I slice down through the top, I've now smushed it up, and I pull this apart, what shape do you now see? You now see a triangle. I've sliced right through there, and I get the result of a triangle. It's a little lopsided right now because, again, it's not a very good plane to cut with. But that's what our cross sections are going to do. If it's parallel to the base, you're going to get your base shape. If it's perpendicular to the base, then you're going to get either a triangle, if it's a pyramid, which means it comes to a point, or you're going to get a rectangle if it's a prism. Okay, so prisms mean that they have two bases. Now, cones and cylinders aren't technically prisms or pyramids. They kind of go along in the prism and pyramid category, but because they don't have edges, they're not really prisms or pyramids. But they follow the same rules. You know, if I cut it parallel, I'm going to get my base shape. If I cut it perpendicular, in this case, I'm going to get the triangle. Okay? All right, let me show you another example. So I have a cylinder, and this is nice and wonderful because of the fact that it just came right out of the tube this way, so I didn't even have to make it. Yay! So that was always nice. So here, again, the idea that if I cut this is kind of like, you know, if you ever had you know, sliced meats that you're trying to cut, or maybe you have that big circular round of cheese that you're trying to cut. When you're slicing it, you're creating these cross sections that you're slicing through. Okay, so for here, again, if I cut parallel to the base, meaning I'm going to slice this way through the base, I'm not going to touch the base at all. The base is going to remain completely untouched. That means that I'm going to be able to create what kind of shape. So what shape do you guys think I'm going to get? If you said a circle, then you are correct. If I slice right through without touching the base at all, I'm going parallel to the base, then I'm creating a circle. Okay? Now, if I take that exact same cylinder, and this time I'm going perpendicular to the base, that means I am going to be cutting through that base shape, cutting right on through it. What shape do you think I'm going to get now? So because it kind of falls along that prism category, we now get a rectangle. Okay, now I hope you didn't say square, because remember, we can't say that something's a square unless we know that the measurements are all the same throughout the entire shape. And I don't know that. I didn't measure this, so I can't say that this is a square, but I can say that it is a rectangle. See, two rectangles that we get. Piecing it together, we've got our cylinder. When I slice perpendicular, meaning I'm cutting through the base, perpendicular to the base, pulling it apart, and I get my rectangle. All right, let's take a look. I have one more shape that I was able to make. All right, so this is a rectangular prism. I do apologize, it's a little chunky on the bottom, but it is a rectangular prism, meaning that it has a whole bunch of rectangles all around it, and that the bases are also rectangles. I can't call them squares because I don't know what their measurements are. They might be a square, they might not be, but I can definitely still call them a rectangle. So it's rectangles for all the faces, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and identify that these two, this top part and this bottom part, are the base shape. So if I were to cut it parallel to the base, meaning I didn't touch that base shape at all, what shape would I get? A rectangle. I know it's hard to see it, sorry, but it is going to come out still to a rectangle. And if I go perpendicular to that base, then what base shape am I going to get? Oof, it's not coming out very pretty. But again, another rectangle. Okay, so when it's a rectangular prism, parallel is going to be a rectangle, perpendicular is going to be a rectangle. Now I want to look at one more prism, and that would be this one. I did not get a chance to make it with the Play-Doh because the Play-Doh wouldn't squeeze in there nicely or come out nicely, unfortunately. So I'm just going to have to show it to you. If we have a triangle for our bases and all these rectangles to connect them, this is called a triangular prism. So with a triangular prism, if I slice it and I don't touch the base, I'm slicing it parallel to the base, then I'm going to get that triangle as my base shape. But if I cut it perpendicular to the base, meaning I'm cutting through that triangle, then I'm just going to get rectangles for my cross section. So I hope that that helps to clarify cross sections for you guys a little bit more. I'm going to have a couple of questions that you can answer to make sure that you understand this through Prodigy Game. So Prodigy Game's got 15 questions that I want you guys to go through. It's all on cross sections. If you haven't done your previous Prodigy Game assignment, it's going to have you still do that first, and then it'll get you into the cross sections. You guys need to make sure you're keeping up on top of all these things. You are testing next week, so you want to make sure that you've got all of your geometry material finished before you take that test next week. There's also going to be a Zoom session today at 3 o'clock, so please make sure that you get on Zoom. The code is linked to the activity feed, the code and the password. You need both to be able to access it, and I will be doing some basic practice problems as a nice review, so that way you guys can ask questions if you have questions, but I'm going to have a set of questions. I am going to go through some basic practice problems from whatever you missed most on the quizzes activity from Wednesday. Okay, thanks for watching.